Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lions Grid. It's Tuesday evening at roundabout 6:30, Jeffrey, which means it's time for us to get together here, to come together, and thankfully this week we get to celebrate what was a Lions victory on Monday Night Football against the arch enemy themselves. Well, not the big bad of the series. It wasn't the Packers, but it was against the team that has been playing spoiler for us of late, the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes, and what a win it was. Never in doubt, and just absolute dominance and some good showing of offensive football and defensive football. Just a great all around win, and it makes you feel good about the team going into to our bye week, getting rested up.
It does. We've been talking about sort of the best case scenario for this team heading into the bye week, and we said, hey, if they can go 3-1 and be relatively healthy come week 5, that's a pretty good place. And I think really, especially again, beating a team that was coming into this game undefeated, and then also coming through here and winning in the way we did, it felt good, Jeffrey. It feels good, felt good. And I think, really looking across the league, the Detroit Lions should be one of the, have one of the more happy fan bases out there, right? Like outside of maybe like the Washington Commanders with how well
yeah,
Daniels
they're shooting up the happiness rankings with how well they're doing too.
Yeah, so, it feels good. And also, you mentioned we came into the game with the black curse jersey of but that is no more. And the new Motown outfit getting that victory. Dan Campbell said he wanted to bring them back, and they came out here on Monday night and took care of business in the new unis.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like Peyton Manning when he saged Ford Field and rid us of the curse of Bobby Lane. So we went through another exorcism here and got our black jerseys cleaned and cleansed.
Absolutely. And we'll take a look here at the box score in just a little bit, Jeffrey, and dig into some of the stats. But really, early throughout this first quarter of the season, right? We know that the Lions defense has kind of been leading the way for this team. But this was the first game where we really saw the offense take control and really be the deciding factor in this game. What were your thoughts about that, getting to see this Lions offense really take off here against the Seahawks?
Pretty good, and they actually. I think the reason the Seahawks were able to score so much is because we were scoring so fast. Actually, if there was only one criticism I had, I mean, you can't really have too many criticisms out of this game, but because we were scoring on big plays, big chunk plays. Seattle. I think this is the first team we played with an actual depleted defense that showed like they were a depleted defense, because they did not look good. Obviously, letting up big plays and letting Goff surgically destroy them in the passing game.
Absolutely. And I'm sure by now, if you've watched anything about this game with the Detroit Lions, you've heard the fact that, of course, Jared Goff had his perfect game here against the Seahawks, going 18 of 18. And really in the game, the Lions were 19 of 19 passing, because Amon-Ra St. Brown did also throw one touchdown pass to Jared Goff. And that's a combined 19-19 perfect passing day here for the Lions. How surprised are you about that, Jeffrey? That's kind of, I mean, I know it's not a huge volume, but it's pretty impressive still.
No, and I mean, he didn't even have to throw anymore because the game was so in hand, so there was no point. But it was kind of funny, actually. Jared Goff didn't know, and and Dan Campbell didn't. No one on the sideline knew, because they're out there taking care of business. They're not worried about stats, which is, I just think, is a good sign overall. But yeah, we've been kind of waiting this year to see a Jared Goff kind of game, like where he's super efficient, throwing for lots of yards, throwing those tutties, and looking not shaky throughout the process. And we got it here for sure.
He stepped up on the biggest stage they've had so far this season. And I know my dad's here in the chat. He's right. Well, I'm not gonna say he's right, because he says Detroit secondary sucked. I don't know if they sucked, but they certainly throughout the game had a bend, not break mentality. They did, of course, it was the highest point total that we've seen, but they still did hold Seattle to 29 points, and 2 of those were on a safety after they came up with a big red zone stand, goal line stand to keep the Seahawks out of the end zone. So, you know, one thing that I will say that I am a little bit concerned about, and I considered making him my chump of the week, but I thought that was going to be a little too aggressive to do. Was Terrion Arnold, right? He's been playing very well. Of course, you know, he's our first round rookie DB, and he's been put in there at the corner position and sort of thrown into the deep end of the pool, right, Jeffrey? But he is one of the most penalized players in the league right now. He has 8 between pass interference and holding penalties on him now. And it definitely seems like he's being a little too handsy, but at the same time, he is also making some plays and shutting down receivers. So, you know, it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough because he's also the type of cornerback he is. He's a super sticky guy. Like he's staying on dudes. He's a great cover guy, and I think a part of it is the growing pains of now all of a sudden from kind of locking down college wide receivers. Now all of a sudden you're knocking down the best receivers in the world, kind of thing. But
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting to see kind of like how, I guess, coming out of this bye week, and we're 4 games in, about a quarter of the season through ish. Teams typically look at it about like a 4-game, like kind of like chunks at a time. Are
Mhm.
they going to are they going to kind of coach him to be less aggressive? Are they happy? They could be happy with Aaron Glenn, could be totally fine with the amount of penalties because ultimately the win totals are adding up. So it'll be curious. I'll be curious to see kind of how he progresses throughout the year.
Yeah, they're definitely mistakes, but so far they haven't been mistakes that this team hasn't been able to overcome. They've had other mistakes that have been more detrimental to the team than the penalties, but it is pretty impressive so far what we have seen from this Detroit defense. And again, Kirby Joseph, we talked about him and Branch being potentially a top 5 safety pair. Of course, Branch was not in this game due to the illness, but Kirby Joseph did get that interception there to sort of seal the victory
He's been a
with a
closer for us.
pretty spectacular spinning one-handed grab in that game. So it was, pretty impressive. And we still have not let up a 100-yard rusher. My
We've
dad
not.
asking how many yards Kenneth Walker
I
had.
think he
He
only had
had
80.
12. Yep, he had 80 yards on 12 carries. He was averaging 6.7 yards a carry and did have 3 TDs. So it was a very productive day. But overall, still keeping a single running back below that 100-yard mark, and still feeling okay. But I will say that Kenneth Walker did look good in his first game back, and with the Lions being a defense that is known for their rushing attack, I know he was only a Spartan for a year, Jeffrey, and he was a product of that transfer portal, but definitely enjoyed seeing him do well, and hopefully as this offensive line for the Seahawks continues to improve, he's shown that he has the talent if he can stay healthy to be successful here in the NFL.
Yeah, he started producing right away, and he owes Mel Tucker some of his salary over there because he was absolutely carrying that Michigan State team clearly, despite them being that bad. But yeah, it's good seeing some Spartans out there doing well out in the league.
Absolutely. And then the only thing about the lines we haven't really talked about, Jeffrey, is we talked about how good the passing game was. We talked about the defense a little bit here. Just the rushing attack, right? We had David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. We didn't put up as many numbers on the ground as the Seahawks did, but we didn't need to, right? We were very effective with David Montgomery and Gibbs. They combined for over 150 yards each, and both had a touchdown. And definitely, like you had mentioned earlier, this did feel like the first game where we knew that the defense, that front 7 for Seattle, was banged up, and it was the first time it really felt like we took advantage
Yeah.
of that sort of opportunity, and we did that with both Gibbs and Montgomery. And I think one of the roaring or boring questions from last episode was, do you think that Gibbs and Montgomery would come out and show that they are one of the top backfields in the league? I think they did that on Monday night.
Yeah, absolutely. They split carries 14 and 12, so another around 50-50 split. 3 touchdowns for both of them combined, 2 for Gibbs, 1 for Monty. Plus Monty had that insane run where he kind of just put his foot in the ground and just broke.
All right,
There's
boom,
the highlight right there.
Just perfect timing.
But yeah, just yeah, it's good seeing this kind of stuff. Usually, in the past years and in my entire NFL fandom, usually I'm watching these plays and it's the Lions are never involved in any of this stuff. So it's cool seeing this and having a muscle flexing win, because you need a few of those every once in a while in every given season.
And it feels good to do it against a team that was 3-0 and a team that has given us problems in recent seasons. So it's it's for many reasons a particularly spicy win here on Monday night. And with David Montgomery, I was a little sore when they let the Swagakaze go down to New Orleans. I was a big fan of Williams, and what he did with the Lions in that one season was pretty special with all those touchdowns. But I got to give credit where credit is due, and David Montgomery has been, I think, one of the better free agent running back acquisitions that we've seen in recent seasons. He's really come in here to Detroit and thrived.
And he was solid when he was in Chicago too. He just never had a decent offense to really kind of run the motor behind. But you're right. Like, shout out to Brad Holmes to kind of see that, with the whole contract thing, letting Williams kind of go to New Orleans. It was a big bummer, I think, especially for like team morale, because he was definitely, not only was he a producer on the field, he was definitely a locker room guy kind of thing, and kind of got to the culture. But yeah, shout out to Brad Holmes to kind of seeing this in division kind of talent here and being like, if Chicago's not going to take advantage of him, we will.
Absolutely. And Jeffrey, let's take a deep dive now into those stats that we were talking about earlier. You can see here, as my dad mentioned, with the defense being shaky, they did give up 516 yards here. So again, it was kind of that bending, not breaking mentality where, they gave up a ton of yards. In this sort of shootout with the Seahawks, we were able to limit the damage they were able to do in terms of points. So that ended up ultimately helping them get the win. But then you can see their yards per play. We'll take a look at the next screen. We didn't have as many plays, Jeffrey, but to your point, when we did have those plays, they were exciting. And they were able to do more with less in this game.
I think Seattle set a record for getting that many first downs that they did, but not winning the game.
38 first downs.
38 or something like that. Yeah, which is
crazy,
kind of nuts. And I think some of it's a bit inflated just because we were scoring so fast that our defense was out there a little bit longer. But definitely something I'm hoping we kind of shore up here with our break.
Yeah, I think it's weird if you look at like this box score, and if you were just like to look at the box score or like the stats right here, and then compare this to like the score from the Tampa game, and I asked you to pick which game the Lions ended up winning, I don't know if you would look at this screen here and then look at its comparative one from the Tampa Bay game where we dominated. You'd probably look at those and pick the Tampa game as us being the winners. But yet here in this game against Seattle, again, the Lions, they didn't have to like dominate the clock. They did exactly what they needed to with the plays they had. And, really, who can argue with the results, man? It was a great game and a great victory for the Lions here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, Seattle owning the time possession. Yeah, if you were to just look at this in a vacuum, you'd be like, man, Detroit put up a stinker, especially with those penalty yards there. Good Lord, that's a tutty. We got to clear that up for sure.
Yeah. And that, again, I think Terrion Arnold has been kind of a part of that with all of his penalties, but there's still work that can be done across the board. Although I like how my dad is talking some cracker down there about the defense there and sucking and all that. When his Packers gave up 28 to Sam Darnold and the Vikings in the first half. I mean, those of us that live in glass houses shouldn't cast stones, I believe is the saying.
Sauce in the halftime to be able to shut down the GQ bust Sam Darnold.
But that's a great way to transition, Jeffrey, because I think now is a great time to move to our next segment here. And let's go ahead and grind the grid, Jeffrey, and take a look back at the week that was week 4 in the NFL. So, of course, things started off on Monday Night Football with the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants kicking off on Thursday Night Football. It was an NFC East matchup, and the Cowboys get the win there 20-15. great for the Cowboys to get a win, but at the same time, they don't have any sort of running game. I think CeeDee Lamb led them in rushing yards with one rush for like 10 yards or something like that. And it doesn't look good for the Cowboys, right? Mike McCarthy
No,
looks in pain on the
he
sidelines.
does. I see him with some 1,000-yard stares, man. He's coaching for his job, and it's going to be difficult if your goals as an organization is to win it all, and you don't do the offseason kind of shoring up your weaknesses, especially a big glaring one like they currently have at running back.
Yeah. So it might be a little bit of is it crazy, Jeffrey, to think that maybe the Washington Commanders are the best team in the NFC East?
Oh man, I you know I'm typically a hater of the NFC East. Pretty much all those teams don't like them. So Commanders have always been kind of a soft spot because they have sucked along with the Lions. So I'm all for it.
It'll be interesting to see how everything plays out as the season goes on there. And then we had the matchup where the Cincinnati Bengals, still looking for their first win on the season. They had the Carolina Panthers coming to town, Jeffrey. And I guess I should have taken it as my lock of the week because they came out 34-24. Joe Burrow and Jahmyr Chase making it look like there are no problems in Cincinnati handling business against that Panthers team. But yeah, it's great they got a win they needed. But it is against the Panthers, Jeffrey, who,
Right.
despite Andy Dalton's best efforts, are still the Panthers. Like
Yeah.
they have looked better with him at QB, but like the team is still very much in a rebuild process, even
Yep.
though Andy Dalton has come in
Absolutely.
and provided better quarterback play. And I think for Cincinnati, it's pretty early in the season still, but they have a game upcoming fairly soon. Is it this week or is it in the following week? Just taking a look at the schedule here. I know fairly soon here. It is next week. So this upcoming weekend in week 5, they are playing the Ravens. That's going to be a much better, I think, test and barometer of do they have things fixed in a very important game
Yeah.
as they try and fight for their playoff lives already in the early part of the season.
Yeah, for sure. Because at this point, they're fighting for a wild card spot here in week 4. So especially it's going to be interesting to see because the Ravens are coming off of a pretty big win here.
They are, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And then we had an NFC South matchup with the Atlanta Falcons hosting the New Orleans Saints. And Jeffrey, the Saints got off to a hot 2-0 start to start the season, but they've sort of cooled off here, going 2 losses back to back here. Young Hoku was the sort of hero of the game, kicking the last second field goal to take the lead. What did you think about this game here where we had the two NFC South rivals squaring off?
Yeah, I think it's going to be that division is just going to be competitive in general. I think, and yeah, this is it's the Saints. They started out super hot, and I still think they're playing pretty well overall. Especially after I think a lot of the offseason was like, oh boy, it's going to be another high draft pick kind of middling year kind of thing. So I don't think they have too much to be disappointed with. Obviously, not being able to get the division loss, but yeah, I think I think they can turn it around, kind of based on the kind of offense and the weapons that they've got.
Yeah, and one thing for the Falcons in this, Bijan Robinson as a fantasy owner, still not super satisfied with his usage. It's year 2 where we can't seem to just feed him the ball the way that I'd like to see it done, but we'll have to see how things go here. And I think really advantage to Tampa Bay in terms of winning this division at this
Yeah.
point. They've looked pretty good, and we'll talk about their win they had against the Eagles here shortly as well. And then an AFC South matchup on the other side of things here. Jeffrey, the Jacksonville Jaguars still now winless on this young season, going down 24-20 to their rival Houston Texans. And Jeffrey, I guess the big question for Jacksonville coming out of this game is, do you think that Doug Peterson is going to be able to finish the season as their head coach?
That's interesting because really a lot of this is because of his choice of kind of keeping Press Taylor as their offensive coordinator, much maligned. Not many people are a fan of him. Doug Peterson is very loyal to him, specifically. And I think the classic kind of head coach move in his situation would be fire a coordinator kind of thing. You're kind of heading
Mhm.
towards that. But given his loyalty to Press Taylor over these years, I don't know. Maybe he might just take that, just go down with the ship, as it were,
Go
with his
down
name.
himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely interesting, and I think their general manager and everything is in probably in hot water as well. I know people have been making a big stink about looking at all the draft capital they've had and the lack of production out of them, and some decisions paying Trevor Lawrence the amount of money they did, only to see him struggle. Obviously, some of the free agent moves they've made as well. Needless to say, Jacksonville is a mess, and not really a surprise they lost that game. Actually, more surprising to me was the fact that Houston, after how good they looked in the early games this season, minus the game against Minnesota, still looked like they were struggling a little bit coming out of that game against the Vikings. Struggled here a little bit on Sunday with Jacksonville.
Yeah, I wonder if we're going to see kind of a sophomore slump here with C.J. Stroud and D'Amico Ryans and the whole crew. I mean, they're a pretty young crew too, and I think bringing in players can do a lot for kind of the culture in the locker room. And I think they had a really good thing going last year, but they did bring in Stephon Diggs, who has been vocal and especially publicly vocal about how he feels about certain situations as the season goes on. So it'll be kind of curious to see if they continue to struggle if Stephon Diggs doesn't start to get a little antsy.
Yeah, certainly. He's had some good production. He's contributed to the team, but there have been times you've seen him on the sideline and things like that, where it's just knowing his history as we do following the game. It's like one of those things where you're like, is there going to be a problem? Is there going to be some beef? We'll have to see. All right, Jeffrey. My father says, no, Jeff, wrong. Stop it and shut it. I think he does have Stephon Diggs in at least one fantasy football league, so that may just be a fantasy owner.
Yeah. He'll still produce, but he'll cry and moan about it the entire time.
That's true. And I guess it is fair. We should have pointed out, too, also that the starting running back, Joe Mixon, and the backup running back were, was it Cam Akers? Or I think Cam Akers also got hurt in that game. So they were down running backs in that game, which probably is also not helping out CJ Stroud. But Jeffrey, next up we had an AFC matchup here between a rookie quarterback and a wily veteran in Mr. Aaron Rodgers. Why don't you walk us through this Denver Jets game?
If you like defensive, gritty football, this was the game for you. For sure. Both these defenses are kind of top tier defenses, I feel like. But difference is when you're looking at this, one has a rookie quarterback and one has arguably one of the better quarterbacks we've seen in the history of the league here. Yes, he is 40 years old, and but the offense has not looked good this entire year so far, and he's already starting to make some underhanded comments about coaching and stuff. So it's more of the Aaron Rodgers experience, I feel. I at the beginning of the year, I figured his talent would kind of be enough, kind of like what it was in Green Bay. But like I mentioned, he's no spring chicken anymore. I don't know if the talent that he has is going to be enough around. I think he's on the other side of kind of being the guy on the field.
Yeah, I think too what's hurting him a little bit is like he was upset with Garrett Wilson at one point that he didn't like break up the seam on a play and like he overthrew him because of it because they weren't on the same page. But like it looks like from a physical aspect, coming off the surgery, that Aaron Rodgers is able to still play at a pretty high level despite being 40. But I don't think like he's now become like so obsessed with like all the other stuff that he does, like, going on his darkness retreats and going to foreign countries to do illicit drugs and like, unwind, that like he isn't doing the same things that he used to do. Like when he helped like Jordy Nelson and like James Jones and like all those different people in Green Bay, like become like fantastic wide receivers. Like he would like spend a lot of time outside of like the normal like football designated times to like practice and work with them, to like put in the work to do that. I don't know if he's doing that at 40 years old with the other wide receivers and the other offensive pieces in New York. So I don't think he's built up that same level of chemistry and things like that he was able to develop early on in his career. I think that's kind of missing. And now he's more just expecting people to be on his page without putting in the work to help get them on his page, which doesn't seem like a recipe for success.
Yeah, and he's got that organization by the balls, essentially. I mean, he's asking for receivers that he wants. He's getting the coaching staff, his offensive coordinator in there, Nathaniel Hackett, right? Most people don't think he would be having a job at this point, but it's kind of become the Aaron Rodgers show, and they've kind of gone all in with this kind of move, bringing him in here. So I don't know. I don't foresee this ending well for them, especially in a year that this is kind of like a make it or break it year for them, I think.
Is it just me, or do the Jets feel a little bit like the Lions of old? I know the Jets have a Super Bowl victory in their history, which is something the Lions franchise does not have, but it feels like no matter what they do, like the improvements they make in the offseason, the coaching staff hires they make, like they do all these things that are supposed to help get them over the hump, and it just results in the same mediocrity, them still not being able to ascend.
Yeah, the Lions have gotten out of kind of that like clown show kind of ownership GM kind of thing, but there are other teams who have historically been like that, and the Jets are definitely one of them.
And we will certainly talk about another one when we get to that Cleveland Oakland game, but that comes a little bit later. And then for my lock of the week, Jeffrey, of course, I told you Minnesota was going to come out here and beat the Packers. And I definitely was feeling more confident at the end of the first half. And then by the end of the second half, was still standing at the end. They got the 31-29 victory. But the Packers definitely brought that game back. And Jordan Love threw for almost 400 yards, 389 yards, and 4 touchdowns in his first game back. He did also have 3 interceptions. That Vikings defense, despite giving up a ton of yards, did look good. And then Aaron Jones, of course, the Vikings running back nowadays, making his return to Lambeau, had 22 carries for 93 yards. And Justin Jefferson, maybe the best wide receiver in the NFL, some would say, 6 receptions, 85 yards, a touchdown, and grittied on the Packers in Lambeau.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
a pretty spectacular catch. But the Vikings, Jeffrey, this was the first NFC North matchup of the year. They came into this game undefeated, and they left Lambeau undefeated. They are still the kings of the North. We'll have to see, as my dad says earlier in chat, what the Lions will do when they run up into Minnesota, because I think it's going to be coming into the season. I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of the Vikings, and so far,
I was expecting them to have kind of the rookie QB kind of like roller coaster kind of season, figuring out what they had with JJ McCarthy. But now it looks like they've got themselves a man behind center.
The Sam Darnold renaissance continues. He looked pretty good. 20 of 28, 275, 3 touchdowns. I mean, they keep rolling on. So we'll have to see.
Makes me a little scared after this bye week, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that is scary is now it's been like the first game, okay, it was like, okay, it was just a game. Second game, it's like, oh, it's just 2 games. Now we're 3 games. Now we're 4 games. It's starting to become a little worrisome that maybe this isn't just like a fleeting moment in time, and that Kevin O'Connell and this Sam Darnold connection are just figuring things out there in Minnesota.
Yeah. And shout out to Kevin O'Connell. I mean, he's had such horrible injury luck. So many bad things go their way, and he still kind of is. I think he's one of the better coaches in the league. It's just unfortunate he's in our division.
Yeah, I will say one important thing that I think the Lions, and really not only this game but across the NFL this week, that the Lions should learn is that an opponent this season is never too far gone. The Packers put up 22 points in the fourth quarter alone to bring this into a 1-score game. And I think, it really stresses the importance of the need to play like from whistle to whistle, because these, right now there is a lot of parity in the NFL. Yes, there are some really bad teams, but for the most part, like these teams are all pretty potent. And so you can't just think the moment you think that you've knocked your opponent out and left them on the floor, they can just pick themselves back up in a hurry and make things a lot more a lot more close than you had originally thought. So if I'm the Lions, definitely keeping an eye on the Vikings because we know what they're capable of. But when it comes to the Packers, you got to kind of recognize the fact that, hey, just because they're down doesn't mean they're out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the more competitive divisions in the league. It's going to be quite the race here.
Should make for a very exciting watching for us, and hopefully, we see some victories there for us. Jeffrey, we have your lock of the game here and a lock of the week, and we're only human, we're not perfect, but up until this pick, Jeffrey, we had been perfect in our locks of the week. So why don't you talk about what happened here with your Steelers?
I expected the Steelers to flex their muscles on defense while Indianapolis is kind of figuring out how to get through the Anthony Richardson experience. What I didn't count on was the elite dragon Joe Flacco coming in and making that offense look like an actual legit kind of consistent offense there. The Colts pulled out this win here. Justin Fields actually didn't look too terrible on the other side of the ball. Mm-hmm. I think he's played overall pretty well. But a game with two fairly good defenses here. It's the one kind of question mark and kind of a head scratcher, really. At one point, Anthony Richardson was taken out of the game due to injury. He had an apparent injury here, and then he got put back in only to get injured again. And he's had this he's had injury issues in the past and trouble kind of staying on the field, but just I just found it very kind of curious. Why would you kind of, I don't know, take chances with a guy who's already seems to be, and I hate to put the label on him so early, to be so injury prone.
Yeah, it's like you're playing either college football or Madden, and you have a player get hurt, and it asks you, "Hey, do you want to keep this player in, or do you want to sub him out?" And it's like risk of re-injury high, and the Colts were like, "Nah, send him back out there. It's fine."
He needs those reps, which he does need reps, but man, he's got to be able to stay alive out there.
Yeah, and was it at the moment that you saw Joe Flacco come into the game that you were like, "Oh no"?
I was quaking in my boots,
lock.
Man. Joe Flacco. That strong jawline, that beard, he was there warming up. I was like, oh God, here we go. He's coming in. My lock of the week is done.
he did look like the Browns should throw everything they have to bring him back because he just
they didn't even make an offer at him to be a backup, which kind of blows my mind.
Craziness. All right, next up, Jeffrey, we had the Rams and Chicago squaring off here. Not an NFC matchup, but not a divisional NFC matchup. Why don't you take us through this game between these two teams here?
Yeah, so the Rams are putting up a fantastic fight every week, but it's so clear how badly the injuries have depleted them on both sides of the ball. But like, there's no weapons for Matt Stafford. He can barely throw the ball. He's getting Detroit flashbacks of having to throw the ball within like half a second. And despite that, they still play a good game just because they've got veterans there. They've got a great coaching staff. But ultimately, Chicago's defense looks legit. And they're just the healthier team here, and they took care of business.
Most certainly. And, it was a good game for Caleb Williams. It looks like he is continuing to get better each week, which is fantastic. Hello, Daku. And, it'll be interesting to see. I think seeing how the Lions offense will stack up against the Chicago defense will be interesting. I think we should be able to take advantage of the fact that they really don't have a running game, although DeAndre Swift did finally have some positive yards. So they did see some success for the Chicago running game. But overall, certainly a little bit still to be desired here for the Bears. But,
DeAndre Swift actually also led in receiving as well. So with Cole Kmet kind of coming here in second. So definitely some things to figure out on offense, but he's doing enough to get it done.
Yeah, can't complain with a win. Well, you can complain, but ultimately, the win is what you need.
People are complaining. Your dad's here in the chat.
Oh, that is true. Where there's a will, he'll find a way. Jeffrey, next up we had a matchup between two playoff hopefuls here. Of course, the Eagles are another team that came into this game with some injuries to their skill positions. But tell us about this Tampa Bay Philly game, Jeffrey.
So Kevin, I'm only human. I'm a man. I'm only a man. I get petty at times. I really love it when I see the Philadelphia Eagles get beat down. Just something about it. A fan base can't boo Santa Claus and get this guy's support. Is all I have to say. But yes, it was a beatdown. Baker Mayfield had he returned to form this week. They just absolutely dominated. I don't quite know. I think there's some trouble over there in the city of brotherly love, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I know they have some people hurt, but they're looking pretty weak, to be honest with you. They're looking pretty weak.
It's definitely struggle city to the point where there's been, a lot of chatter already around Nick Sirianni.
Yes.
He was already kind of on the hot seat last season anyways with everything that happened in their collapse there towards the end of the season. But Jeffrey, I know we already talked about Doug Peterson potentially not. Do you think if Philly goes on a trajectory where they're going to miss the playoffs, do you think we might see Nick Sirianni let go before the end of the season?
I'm surprised that he's even the coach this year. I mean, by all accounts, from all the things that came out of last year and during the offseason, that locker room absolutely imploded on itself. There was it was the curse of Big Dom. It was after that game where Big Dom got banned from being on the field. Their head of security is about the time where they started going down. And one of the stories was that Big Dom would often intercede in the personal, like with Sirianni and kind of keeping him in check as far as he's a certain way. Let me say that. It rubs people the wrong way when you're losing. I'll just say that. And I'm surprised he was brought back despite, all the just the darkness that we saw at the end there with the locker room and just the 11-win team just absolutely just phoning it home at the end of the year.
Just that black hole collapsing on itself.
Yes.
Pretty rough. Next up, Jeffrey, we had New England and San Francisco. Not necessarily a surprising outcome in this one, Jeffrey, but why don't you take us through this game here?
Yeah, not too surprising given kind of the talent disparity, especially on the offensive side of the ball for the Patriots. I love me some Jacoby Brissett. Cut me off a piece of that brisket, but he can't do anything behind that offensive line. I don't think anybody can. And people kind of calling for Drake May to get out there. It's like, do you really want to put him out there and have him just get killed now and just break him?
Set him out there as cannon fodder?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen, even in the past few years, we've seen several teams put out quarterbacks who are just not ready, and it didn't work out. Bryce Young, it comes to mind, just someone who just
Josh Rosen,
just like people who
Zach Wilson, plenty of guys.
It's not looking good, and we knew it was going to be a rebuilding year anyway for the Patriots. It's this one's not too surprising for sure. Just a kind of a open and shut. Let's get business done here for San Francisco.
Yeah, and one thing that I do find surprising is that Ramondre Stevens, he's looked good, running the ball, but he has had a case of the fumbles here.
Yes.
And he has a fumble in each one of the games so far this season. So that definitely isn't helping out, along with the offensive line struggles. And certainly San Francisco, the fact that Juwan Jennings continues to outperform Brandon Ayuk is just a travesty of the highest, especially with, the injuries going on with Christian McCaffrey and Debo, and George Kittle being beat up as well. Like Ayuk was paid all this money and still continues. I'm pretty sure at this point, Jared Goff has more receiving touchdowns on the season than Brandon Ayuk does.
Does he have a tutty this year?
He does not. So,
man.
That is the state of the world. They just paid him all that money, and Jared Goff has more receiving touchdowns than he has.
Sounds like a salty Brandon Ayuk owner over there. As that,
I mean, he is no longer on my team. I had made the decision. There were better free agent options, and I've let him go. And if he goes on and he performs for someone else, I guess that's fine, but San Francisco might want to do the same thing and just let them fly because it's not been good here so far. Something that has been good so far this season, though, and we already talked about him a little bit, Jeffrey. Jalen Daniels and this Washington Commanders team. I think coming out of this game, I have more questions about the Cardinals than I do about the Commanders, because the Cardinals came out, and yes, we've talked about the Rams being depleted and having all the injuries and stuff, but they smoked the Rams and they played a decent game against us. And then they just get taken to the cleaners by the Commanders, right? 42-14. Never a doubt here. Washington was able to run the ball. They were able to throw the ball. Yeah, and Jaden Daniels, of course.
Jaden Daniels, he leads the league in completion.
Yeah, he set a record for what is it? The first 4 games with the 82% completion rate.
Yeah, and I think people weren't expecting that. I think people were thinking about some other rookie quarterbacks popping off, not necessarily him. But yeah, all good feelings for the Commanders. I mean, this is just just icing on the cake for them here, just because they got their franchise quarterback, looks like, and it's working. But on Cardinals side, I really thought that they'd be way more competitive in this game. I think that they just. They just didn't look good. And last year they were, they were depleted. Kyle Murray was coming back. They were competitive, and you could tell kind of they had an edge on coaching. But this game just wasn't good. So this might be let's burn the tape and get it next week kind of thing.
Yeah, and they do have the 49ers this upcoming week, so a chance for them. It's a division rival, so we'll have to see if they look any better taking on them. Moving on here to the Kansas City Chiefs taking on their division rival Los Angeles Chargers. Jeffrey, this was a game where yet again the Chiefs remain undefeated despite not putting out their best performance offensively. Their defense has really been the thing that's been carrying them through this season so far. Patrick Mahomes has not looked like he's not lighting the world on fire by any means. And in this game in particular, something that I've never seen, through that interception, and then Rice was trying to help him out, was coming back, ended up knocking that ball out, and they ended up recovering that fumble, so it negated his interception. But in that process, Mahomes went to go try and help make the tackle and blew out Rice's. I'm not sure exactly if they've said what the injury is, but I know they were thinking it's pretty bad, and I haven't seen yet if they come back and said that he did tear his ACL. But thinking that it's going to be a pretty substantial injury. So I've never seen that, a quarterback throw an interception and then on the tackle take out his number 1 wide receiver for the season. That's crazy.
That was pretty wild. Then probably not something you should be doing. Probably not something you should be doing, but I mean, you can't fault him. He's out there competing and whatnot. But
it's not like he meant to do it. Just that is that is some just horrible. Let's.
Yeah, and as far as the passing offense too, Rice was one of their bright spots. So it's going to be. I think it's going to be tough sledding. They have to prove me wrong at some point. I guess they have to prove they're not the champion, right? I could totally see them coming out, and so they find someone like Jawan Jennings, just someone at the bottom of the roster. And Devontae Adams looks kind of pissed over there in Las Vegas. Get ready to learn how to speak Kansas City, buddy.
Yeah, you got Devontae Adams. That's one thing. So after this game, a bunch of people have been taking a look at what wide receivers can the Chiefs go out and get, and definitely Devontae Adams is a name that gets mentioned a lot, but he is a guy who is owed quite a bit of money. In Kansas City, one of the things that's going to limit them in who they can bring in is their cap room situation. So he may be a little bit too rich for their blood, but somebody like Amari Cooper with the Browns could be an interesting pickup or something like that. So, there's still options out there, but with them, they'll have to be, they'll have to pay attention to their cap space. But also, I think one of the things about the Chiefs in this, ever since they got rid of Tyreek Hill, right, they've always found a way for this offense to keep going. it hasn't always been through trades. Like they haven't always gone and just like brought in a playmaker. They always like find a way to like bring them up internally. So whether that be, Travis Kelce has been rather quiet on the season. So down the stretch, maybe his role and his involvement in the offense increases, or maybe Xavier Worthy takes over that spot for Rice. It's going to be interesting to see what Andy Reid and this Kansas City Chiefs offense does to sort of respond. And maybe they just say, hey, the offense carried us for the first 2 Super Bowls. We'll let the defense carry us to number 3. Maybe let Steve Spagnuolo and crew handle business.
Yeah, like I said, I think they still get the chance to prove that they're not the champions, and really so.
And they're undefeated this season, so it's been a long time since they've lost a football game. So until someone's got to beat them. Then, of course, Jeffrey, we had talked earlier, and we've hinted at Cleveland in this game against the Las Vegas Raiders before. But this, Jeffrey, 16-20, the final score. But this felt like a game where neither team wanted to win, right? Like,
it was
every time either side would build up momentum, they would just go out there and just something would happen. And ultimately, the Raiders were able to get the win because the Browns just like out Browns how much the Raiders could Raider this game. And it I don't know. This was there were some exciting plays in the game, but like this was just a painful game to watch and like try to put myself in the shoes of like fans from either side. It was
it's tough, especially if you're a Browns fan. Right. I mean, there's plenty of things to be excited about your team. Defense looks fantastic again this year, even through these 3 games. When you had a competent quarterback in the system, they were rolling, right? But it's tough. They're not getting the Deshaun Watson that they gave up their souls for. I'll say that. He's not the guy who was in Houston. He's not, he's just not the guy that they're paying that much amount of capital for.
Yeah, they had that moment to trade their souls with the devil, and they thought they were getting something, and it ended up, instead of being magic, it ended up being more like that voodoo where they got what they wanted, but they lost what they had, and it
monkey pod that.
It hasn't been good, and as my dad points out, there, kind of reaping their just desserts from everything there. So, and on the other side, I definitely was excited that the Raiders brought in Antonio Pierce and made him their head coach, because I think he is a guy like Dan Campbell that can come in and help them establish the type of culture and things like that they want. But at this point in time, with just the QB situation, I love Gardner Minshew, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out there in Las Vegas. Like the QB situation, they don't have a running game out there either. All of the running back carousel we saw this season, they have Jahmyr White is their starting guy, and it hasn't really paid off for them. They have a lot of good players still on this team. But it just feels like they are probably at least a season or 2 away from being successful here.
Yeah.
The other woman has come out and says,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess in that regard, he is the
man. When you put it like that, that is accurate. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, Jeffrey. Sunday Night Football was a good matchup between Buffalo and Baltimore, and I think a bit of a surprising outcome here. But why don't you talk about this Sunday Night Football matchup?
Yeah, so this was surprising. I thought we would see kind of a competitive heavyweight kind of battle kind of thing on Sunday night, but Buffalo did not look good. It's this was very much needed for Baltimore and their psyche, kind of after the way this first quarter of the season has kind of gone through for them. But yeah, just a dominant win, and really the only thing I can say on the Baltimore side that they are kind of looking at is trying to get their star tight end involved. I mean, Mark Andrews had a pretty quiet season. I think his production is definitely being missed. right? I know he's coming off of a pretty gnarly injury himself from last year, but overall, they get another week. They get a win. They get another week to get kind of everything right, and they just blew the doors off of Buffalo. And on Buffalo's side, it's I think eventually, when you're only putting up 10 points, your defense is going to get cooked out there at some point. So, we still haven't seen, I guess, anybody kind of step up to kind of fill the production role that Stephon Diggs kind of left him. Despite me complaining about his crying and whining, he does produce.
Yeah, this was the first game where it really did feel like the Buffalo offense was kind of lacking weapons and like the ability to produce. Josh Allen was out there trying to do everything he could, but it just there weren't players stepping up and making enough plays to make the difference here against this Baltimore team. And then a shout out to the Ravens, but in particular Derrick Henry, man. Like, I don't know, he is just the best combination of just like natural skill and toughness combined with like work ethic that I think is the best example of it that's out there, because he is just, what he is able to do is crazy. And
his first touch of the game was like a 70-something yard touchdown run. That big man is so fast, and I feel like that shouldn't be a thing.
And he's like, not only is he so fast and that large, like he's also older and he's still that fast. It's crazy just what he's doing. And I think for the Ravens, if you're the Cowboys and you're looking around saying, why didn't we, like, the Ravens are just can point at him and do the Nelson laugh, the ha, because it's like, we paid him the money and look at how it's going for us. But certainly, definitely helping out Baltimore there, rebound in their playoff chances. They're getting a win over Buffalo. Jeffrey, next up, we had two games on Monday Night Football. This one, a little bit of a snoozer, but why don't you talk to us about this Tennessee-Miami game?
Yeah, so the Miami Dolphins, they're in free fall right now, which is surprising, kind of given that Mike McDaniel is supposed to be kind of like, like a revolutionary coach, especially on offense. So I'm surprised that, like, even though, you don't have your star quarterback out there at this point, I at least think if he does have that kind of offensive acumen that people kind of claim he has and why he's there, like, I feel like the offense should be better despite, not having Tua out there. And I know you and I were chatting a little bit before the show, Kevin, about kind of how Miami has kind of constructed their offense around Tua, kind of taking advantage of his strengths, his elite strength being getting his processing by far, just getting the ball out very quickly, and they kind of built that around there. But you were also talking about kind of that wide receiver usage and kind of how the speed kind of gets to them a little bit.
Yeah, they're kind of like a team that's built for straightaways, and yet they find themselves on road courses where there's nothing but turns. So, like, because Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are so fast, like, they have a play percentage that is less than like the other number 1 and number 2 wide receivers in the league. So they spend a lot more time on the sidelines than, say, like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams do for the Lions. And that just results in the fact that their number 3 and number 4 guys, they don't really have those. So when they're on the sidelines, it really makes the team one-dimensional. It's like, okay, we don't see Waddle, we don't see Hill out here. They're going to be running the ball.
And their run offense has not been good too. They've had injuries. Yeah. Mostert has been dealing with a chest issue. Achan's putting up a little bit numbers, but like you said, like, if you know that they're going to lean on the run, they can stack that box. There's a lot that they can do. And your dad actually poses a interesting question here, and I'm going to knock on wood before we talk about this. But what would the Detroit Lions offense look like if Goff were to go down? And I think that'd be super interesting. I think we would be, we'd be better set up than Miami with kind of what you were talking about. I think our offense has I think we have a better utilization of kind of the wide receiver weapons. And also we have a much better run attack than Miami. So yeah, we would probably be leaning on the run quite heavily, right? See what Hendon Hooker looks like out there a
Mhm.
bit, give him a little bit of a dual threat action out there. But I think we would also have to rely on the run game, but it would force us to be one dimensional, and no team wants to be able to do that. No good team can do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly fair. Any team that loses their starting quarterback it's going to be a bad time, right? But I think there's degrees of bad times that you can have, and the fact that it's looked so bad for Miami that they go from being one of the most electric offenses in the league to being a barely functional NFL offense. I think that's that's the hard part, because Tua is, I think, a very good quarterback, but like he isn't a great quarterback or like a generational quarterback. It's not like you're trying to replace Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or prime Aaron Rodgers. You're trying to replace Tua, who again is a very good quarterback, and in this offense with Mike McDaniels looks good, but like it's you're comparatively you're not trying to swap out something that is just key and crucial to it. And so the fact that it does go from being like so good to just so bad is pretty jarring.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's a way that it's going to get fixed for the Dolphins this season, unless
yeah,
Tua gets cleared and comes back and can stay healthy.
yeah. And then on Tennessee's side, Will Levis left with an injury. Brian Callahan did say he's going to be sticking with Will Levis, and I think that's a good idea. See what he's got. You're in a rebuilding year anyway, but that was kind of the one notable thing that he did have a bit of a shoulder issue, and that took him out of the game.
Very good. And then, of course, Jeffrey, the last game, the Monday Night Football game we've already talked about here, the Lions and the Seahawks.
Yeah, just domination, feel good all around, happy fall. Starting out Spooktober with not a spook on the Lions side. I'll take that. Just
Firm handshakes all around, gentlemen. Let's head into this bye week.
Yes,
Job well done.
Brings a tear to my eye.
Fantastic. All right, Jeffrey, we're going to now go from our the grid, to our King of the North segment, and taking a look here, of course, still on top, the Minnesota Vikings, 4-0, now 1-0 in NFC North play. Next, we have the Lions at 3-1, trying to usurp or prevent them from usurping our throne, because it's still our throne until until it's not. So we took it last year. The Vikings currently are threatening for it, but hey, there's still a long way to go. Chicago now will take over the third position, because Green Bay, even though they're both 2-2 on the season, Green Bay now 0-1 in NFC North play, with that loss to the Vikings. And for the Vikings, certainly it helps them out. It makes it more likely that they may, in fact, sweep the series with the Packers, because they were able to get that win on the road in Lambeau.
Yeah, that's huge for them.
Yeah.
And I think at this point with the standing, it's well deserved. I think overall they have looked a hair better than us, and that shows. And they've got that division win, so well deserved on their front. Congratulations, Sam Darnold.
He's having himself a renaissance, and he's looking good. All right, Jeffrey. Time to finish out today's episode with our champ and chump picks. Let's go ahead, Jeffrey, and start with your champ here in week number 4.
My champ this week has to be Jared Goff for me. Just throwing that perfect 18 for 18, just absolutely being a surgeon out there, doing what he does best. That was a vintage Jared Goff game for sure. Just accurate dimes, just slicing and dicing. A good coming out game for after what I would consider a fairly shaky start. So I got to give it to Mr. Goff.
He definitely righted the ship there and made a pretty good statement there on a prime time in the biggest stage. So love to see that, and against a team that we've struggled against. So good stuff there. My champ is going to be Graham Glasgow. He stepped in and started at center for us with Frank Ragnow out, and played played well, filling in there. And it's difficult to come in and replace a Pro Bowl player, but he did so and looked good out there. And semi shout out also to Brad Holmes for bringing him back in. Of course, he had left. He was originally came into the league with the Lions, then he left for Denver for a little bit, and then we ended up bringing him back. And being able to have that versatility of a guy who can start at center and guard where he usually is. Glasgow is definitely a big reason that offensive line was able to exploit those weaknesses in the Seattle Seahawks front seven with all those injuries. Jeffrey, who do you got as your chump this week?
Ooh, my chump of the week is Kevin Mahoney Sr. for coming in, bringing all that negativity and trash talking into the chat. No, my chump of the week is head coach for the Colts, Shane Steichen. You got to protect your rookie plus out there with Anthony Richardson. He's hurting. Don't don't force the issue, especially if he's going to work out in the long run. You got to take caution with your franchise out there. So I'd say that was just a chump move, kind of bringing him out there after not fully kind of clearing to see if he was all right.
I like that. My chump is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. It seemed like last season they were on like almost even keel with the Lions, right? They were a team that was supposed to be ascending in the AFC South, a team that, had a young QB, was going to be looking to make a push. And now they've turned into this just dumpster fire of a team where it doesn't look good. I don't know if there's a happy outcome in store for the Jaguars. They are definitely in struggle city. And like I said, I would be very surprised if at the end of the year, their head coach and their front office staff is there. There's already rumblings about their owner being upset and potentially looking to make changes. And so there's a long way to go in the season. And maybe if they go on a run, maybe that can help change things. But it doesn't feel good in Jacksonville right now if you're a Jaguars fan. So they're my chumps. But an honorable mention that I will call out is as mentioned in that game against Seattle, we were able to have that red zone stop and we're able to stop them from putting up points. But then on the third down, we had the safety where we had the play call. Like that was probably that whole series of events where we let that play calling, and we had so much momentum by stopping them from getting in the end zone and preventing them from getting any points. And then we just go out there and we do like the one thing we couldn't do. Like we knew we would be getting the ball on the one. You can't give up the safety because, of course, the bad thing with the safety, you give them 2 points and then you have to punt the ball back to them. So like you couldn't take the safety. Jared Goff did try his best to stretch the ball out, but you don't get forward momentum apparently, which was something that I learned during the Monday night broadcast.
Yeah,
it does not count for safeties. There's no forward momentum. So even though he had the ball across, when he was ultimately down, the ball was still touching the goal line, and so that was a safety. And it made that end of that game a little bit more interesting than it needed to be. So it's not worthy necessarily of my chump of the week, but just a little honorable mention there. We've been pretty glowing of the Lions so far this season, Jeffrey. I think we've given them criticism where fair, and that was just another area where it was like, guys, there was one thing we couldn't do, and we kind of did it. So, but other than that, that'd be sort of like my one kind of complaint with the game. But overall, it's still a very nice victory for the Lions. The fact that they were able to overcome that too, pretty impressive.
Yeah. Mark of a good team.
Mark
of a good team.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody who stuck with us for tonight's episode. We're coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can also check out highlights from our streams on YouTube, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. All those good things. And if you do like the show and want to help the channel grow, best way to do it is to like, subscribe, all of that good things. And we definitely appreciate your support as we look to continue to build this thing as we're going. But so far, 4 weeks in, Jeffrey, this is episode number 9 here. We're cooking with some fire so far.
Yeah, it's excited. I'm excited. It's now we're getting though into NFC North season, so we'll kind of see how we truly stack up against some hot teams here. But we can take a week off and watch some neutral football without having any Lions drama on the line.
Absolutely, we get a week to heal and get ready for our week 6 matchup against the Dallas Cowboys. Get revenge against those Cowboys down in Jerry World. So,
which Kevin, I don't know if this is a spoiler alert, but is that the weekend that you're going to be at my house? Could we be having a show where we are both in the same place?
That is, in fact, we will be live together in Casa del Jeffrey.
Yes, yeah, that should be exciting. Maybe we'll think of something special for that episode. Why not?
Yeah, it'd be good. And of course, we will be live, of course, this Sunday as well. It should be more of a laid back episode because again, we're just taking a look at sort of the matchups that will be happening across the league. Because as Jeffrey mentioned, the Lions will be on a bye, so we don't have to go too hard in the paint. We get a nice little easy week for us as well, a little layup. So. All right, everyone. Well, thanks again for tuning in. I'm Kevin Marhine. He's Jeffrey Raymond. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you during the next episode. Jeffrey, as always, the way to end the episode is with a good old Go Lions.
Go Lions.
All right, everyone. Night, night.